Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you've all been keeping well at what has been a rather challenging time around the world, certainly in Melbourne at the moment. And I hope everybody is doing their best to keep safe and well and to protect the wider community at the moment. Tonight I'm going to be talking about what I think is a really, really important topic. And there are a lot of topics in obstetrics and around birth and parenthood that I think are very difficult to talk about. And when topics are difficult to talk about, I think that the tendency is to try and avoid talking about them. But I'm hoping that we can tackle some of these topics together to make them more comfortable, to make them better understood. And I'm really delighted that tonight I've got a very special guest who'll be joining our chat. At some point in all of our lives, we'll be touched or affected by baby loss, whether that's something that we experience personally or something that affects someone in our community, be it a family member, a friend, a colleague. And for people going through it, it is, beyond difficult, but it can also be such a challenge for their loved ones. And I'm hoping that this discussion tonight will sort of make it something that people are more able to deal with personally and when sort of looking after loved ones who experience it. Loss of a baby can occur at a different number of stages. Some people lose their babies after the baby's been born. Other people can lose their babies while they're still pregnant, either early on or later in the pregnancy. And whilst there are slight differences between these, there are certainly some common themes. And I think that the discussion tonight will be useful for anyone going through any of those different experiences. So as I said tonight, I'm very, very lucky to be joined by Priyanka Saha. And Priyanka, unfortunately, and tragically lost her little girl, Lily, in 2017 to a very rare brain condition at about 10 months of age. So tonight, Priyanka is very bravely and kindly going to share her story with us. We'll discuss coping with a sudden and life-changing diagnosis during pregnancy. We'll talk about surviving after loss and then managing a subsequent pregnancy. Priyanka will also give us her insights on how you as a family member or friend or colleague or member of a community can help families going through this. So I'm going to get Priyanka to join us now. Hi Priyanka, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. I'm very
Excellent.
excited to be here.
Thank you, and I'm just so excited that you were happy to join me tonight. I was sort of looking for a while at talking about this topic with people, and I just wanted to find the right avenue to do it. And I think that there is no better way to do it than to talk with someone who's been through it personally. And I know this is obviously something that is not easy for you to talk about. I think, you never get over a loss. It's not something that ever is able to be dealt with in that way, but it's something that you learn to integrate into the rest of your life. And I understand that it must always be hard to talk about, but I'm so grateful for you being with me tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And to be honest, anything that gives me an excuse to talk about Lily, that brings me a lot of joy too.
Beautiful.
So
Amazing. Well, thank you for bringing her with this evening as well. Excellent, Priyanka. So obviously a lot of this is, as I said, going to be really hard to talk about. And if at any point, it becomes uncomfortable, feel free to deviate the conversation in a different direction. But I thought that, it would be really useful for people to hear about your experience, but also to talk about what you've learnt from losing Lily, both personally, but also advice that will benefit people who know others that have gone through loss. Because when you see people who have a family member or a friend who's lost a baby, they don't know what to do if they've not been through it themselves, and they often either avoid it completely or they become too intrusive. And I'm hoping you'll be able to help us find that happy medium of the best way to support people through loss as well tonight.
Yeah, I've actually taken some notes. So if you see me looking down, I'm kind of making sure that I don't miss any of those points.
Brilliant.
yeah, that I,
Fantastic. And I've also got some questions here that people have put to me. So I've got them written down too. So if I'm looking at my computer just under my phone, then that's what I'm doing as well. So Priyanka, would you be happy to start by telling us a little bit about your pregnancy with Lily? You know, I understand that as far as you guys knew for a long part of it, it was all going very well and smoothly until it all sort of changed. So do you want to just talk us through that a little bit if possible?
yeah. So the first 36 weeks were very normal. Um, I had actually had an ectopic pregnancy prior to Lily, so
Yep,
the first few weeks were a bit traumatic. I think anyone who's
definitely.
that, it's very stressful. And I guess in that sense, both my pregnancies with Jasper, with Lily, were pregnancies after loss. So
Yeah,
there was a bit of nervousness and anxiety. But once I got through those first few weeks with Lily, it was a very straightforward pregnancy. I did
yep,
the NIPT testing. I got, through my 12-week scan with flying
yep,
colours and my
yep,
20-week scan.
yep.
Really was on the home stretch, and it wasn't until a routine sizing scan at 36 weeks showed a problem in the development of the baby's brain that alarm
Right.
bells started ringing. So, it was kind of the very end of the pregnancy.
Absolutely. I think by 36 weeks, most people presume they're, home and hosed, everything's fine, and it's just the birth that they have to go, really.
Yeah, so it was it was terrible. I often say that the people that drove to the hospital that day for that 36-week scan are not
Yeah,
the people that we are anymore. We said goodbye to them that day and started on a path to become very different people.
yeah,
And yeah, I don't think anything could really change the shock of that
no,
sort of a diagnosis at such a late stage in pregnancy. Um,
definitely.
mm,
Absolutely. And, I imagine after receiving that news, the next few weeks were just so difficult for you. How did you manage to get through the next few weeks?
I think to start off with, a lot of it is just initial shock, complete
Yeah,
and utter shock. We did fall apart. My husband says that I went into kind of cross-examination mode straight
yep,
away, and I think
yep,
that's my modus, is to want to know everything. So I initially wanted
definitely.
to know more about the condition, who the
Yep,
best doctors were, what we
yep,
could do,
yep,
and so we embarked on a series of meeting with different doctors,
yep,
neurologists,
yep,
neonatologists, and understanding more about the condition. So we learnt that Lily's brain hadn't developed correctly. So instead of having the folds and the grooves, her brain was
yep,
smooth.
yep,
And there was nothing. We learnt there was nothing that we could do. So I think there was initial shock in managing it. My parents, both sets of parents don't live in Melbourne, so my mum.
wow, that must have been so difficult.
Yeah, we had beautiful friends, but in that initial shock, we didn't bring a lot of people into our circle, just
Yep,
our really close friends and our family. And so my mum actually just flew over and moved in, and she kind of kept us functioning. She kept us fed
great.
and kept our
Yep,
clothes washed. And we just went for walks and we tried to process what was happening. And we watched a lot of Harry Potter. Like, I think
yep,
when you're going through something really traumatic, you reach a point where you just can't take any more in. So we did
absolutely.
escapism, and that was something that we did. And I think even though it was horrendous to get a diagnosis so late in the stage, having those extra few weeks gave us time to think about how Lily's life might be, what kind of
Sure.
medical interventions we would choose for her, and how we could, let her have as good a life as possible. So there was some sort of, I don't want to say it was a blessing, but it wasn't all bad that we found out that late, because we had a few weeks to plan. Whereas I think if you were to find
Definitely.
out in the same time of birth, you'd be
Yeah,
juggling all the new parent stuff plus the catastrophic.
absolutely. Without any preparation.
Yeah. So
Definitely. It's really interesting you say that, and, talking about having as much information as you could gather. And I say that to couples about all sorts of different testing that's offered in pregnancy. Genetic screening, for example, I say
yeah,
having information doesn't commit you to doing anything with it. But without information, it's very difficult to make informed decisions. And I sort of completely echo what you're saying from a professional or obstetric point of view, that information is very powerful because it allows you to prepare for what having that information sort of means for you and your family. And I do find that with my patients who have sudden unexpected diagnoses, that information is what they want. There are some that retract initially, but after that they often say, look, just tell us everything we can know about it, because preparation, you know, allows you to put together all your coping mechanisms and strategies so that when the time actually arrives, you've got everything as best prepared as possible.
Yeah, I think so too. I always say knowledge is power. It doesn't matter what you choose to do with that knowledge, but having the knowledge can't hurt. It can just make you more equipped to make informed decisions. So
absolutely, I think it's such a sensible approach. I really, really do. And then obviously Lily was born a few weeks later, and sort of how was that for you, knowing that there had been this finding on the ultrasound a few weeks earlier, but not knowing exactly what it would actually mean for her, given the spectrum of sort of, effects that it can have on a child?
It was incredibly hard. So by that stage, we had started to investigate and understand that there could be ranges in severity of her condition. And the spectrum was really broad. Some children live for a long time and others live, the lifespan was about 2 years or less. After Lily was born, we did some additional genetic testing, and that was when we discovered she had Miller-Dieker syndrome, which is the most severe form of the condition. So at that stage, we were given sort of, you know, you might have 2 years, but it was also hard because some doctors would say, oh no, you might have 10 years. And we were like, well, just understanding how
so much inconsistency.
And living with that, and also because it's so rare, a lot of the data and the research was out of date. I didn't at that time turn to social media or forums, and I had been kind of warned away from them by some of the medical team in that it can be overwhelming. And I think that was right for me at the time, but now I also think there can be a lot of really good information that comes through some of those forums, because parents are dealing with everyday symptoms and that sort of thing, and they can have insights that sometimes medical teams might not have, because it's such a rare condition, and you can gather connections from all over the world now in a completely different way.
Absolutely.
So yeah, look, Lily's life we chose. We learnt about paediatric palliative care early on, and we worked really hard with the support of our medical teams to make her life as least medicalised as it safely and comfortably could be. And for us, that meant kind of having her at home. We travelled around Australia with her. She went to New Zealand.
Amazing.
Spent a lot of time with all of our family. And she actually only went to hospital once for a day. Wow. Started having seizures, and after that we cared for her at home, and we had, you know, very supportive doctors who were available on phones, and we could call them, and we had support at home. But yeah, she lived her entire life with us. She's in the same room as us every night.
Incredible.
And, I think we felt that we did everything that we could for her to have as good a life as she could. It's always a shock. We knew she was going to die, but it's always a shock when it happens.
Oh, I can't imagine.
We thought we would have longer because we were given these 2 years, you know, 10 years kind of thing. So when it happened at 10 and a half months, it was terrible. It was, and I look back now and I can see that, you know, her health was declining, but often with children with serious illnesses, they seem to turn a corner. And the shock, there was a big shock when she did die, at home in my arms at 10 and a half months. And Will was, my husband was there, and we just, she peacefully, it was as peaceful as it could be.
I'm so sorry for your loss. I know it's years ago, but as I say, I don't think it's anything you ever get over, and you shouldn't ever get over it completely, because it's such an important part of who you are. And I think that, Lily was obviously so lucky to have you as parents looking after her at home, and how lucky you guys were to have had her in your lives, because, look what she's done now for you and so many other families who will now benefit from the amazing work that you guys are doing. So, it's so important to try and take positives out of these scenarios, and it seems like that's exactly what you've done. So I applaud you, beyond words, for doing that. Yeah,
look, and I think there's a lot of meaning in finding a purpose after such a loss, and that has really helped me. and kind of growing through it. And, you know, not long after Lily died, we decided we wanted to do something. Friends of ours actually came to us.
Yeah.
They wanted to do something, and they were sort of like, we buy flowers. Like, what about we set up a memorial fund? Would you guys be on board with that instead of
Incredible.
just, you know, and so they helped us to set that up, and I kind of threw myself into that.
Brilliant.
And yeah, so that has given me a lot of meaning at
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you to come back to that later, because I want to hear all about the Lily Calvert Foundation, and also to talk about what family and friends can do that's actually meaningful and helpful. But before we do that, someone would just like to see your photo of Lily again.
Oh, yes.
Gorgeous. How old was she in that photo?
I think she was about 9 months. There's another one here. That's a daddy and Lily photo.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. There's a very special bond between dads and little girls, I think. I speak for that personally, actually. But no, really lovely to have those memories around you. And thank you for showing them to us tonight. Really appreciate it. So talking about, you know, that awful time that you had, those 10 months leading up to her passing away and then actually losing her, what got you through that time? What is your advice for couples who are going through this, or, you know, women and families who are dealing with this sort of scenario? What actually gets you through it?
Look, it's a big question, and I think firstly there's no one single thing that will get anybody through anything. I think for us, firstly, after Lily died, we were very lucky to be able to use a cuddle cot. So that is a cot with a cooling system installed in it, for anybody who doesn't know. And it means that rather than your baby having to go to the morgue or to a funeral, she was able to stay in the cuddle cot at the hospice, very special kids. And we were lucky that the hospice was very close to our home. So Lily went there for the 4 days before the funeral, and that was a really incredible part of our grieving process. We were able to see her every day. We could stay there if we wanted to. So I think for anyone who experienced the loss of an infant or a stillbirth, if they can have access to a cuddle cot, and a lot of hospitals do have them now, and a lot of services will even allow you to take the cuddle cot home. So for people, just to be able to take their baby home to the nursery and have that time, I think is incredibly important. So we did that, and then we went to Japan after Lily died. We just booked a flight. Don't go to Japan and don't pre-book. It's not going without organising. A very expensive holiday, because
definitely
you're meant to book your accommodation. You're not meant to stand outside and go, oh, yes, Shangri-La. You booked out. That's grief, though. You kind of just do things. So we went to Japan and we wandered around, and it was an incredibly difficult time. Now, I think one of the biggest things for me in understanding how to kind of handle grief was the realization that happiness and sadness can coexist.
Great.
So, and that holds forever. So, you know, we grow up in a society where we're told you must be happy or you must be sad. You can't be both. Actually, it's completely not true. In the happiest of moments, you might often find, you know, I will often find I'm sad because one of the people I love is always going to be missing. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. And similarly, I think when you immediately lose somebody, a lot of people feel guilty if they smile or they laugh the first time that they smile after their baby died, or they laugh. But actually accepting that even in those moments, you can, like, there is laughter, even in the darkest moments. And we said at Lily's funeral that there is power in a cup of tea and a good laugh, you know. And
absolutely.
Being able to see that in your darkest moments is really helpful, and rather than taking a nothing approach. So that that was enlightening for me to accept that and be like, okay, it's normal, it's fine, you know. You can go at once. And I asked Will, my husband, tonight what his advice was in what he thought got us through, and he said talking a lot. And I think particularly for the dads, talking is something that doesn't always come easily. So
Right.
talking, we had a really structured approach in that we kind of said, right, we need to make sure that we're checking in with each other at these times. We're going to see a psychologist, we're going to speak to our counselor, and we're going to go together. And we walked. So walking means you're not holding your phone because you're walking.
That's right.
Looking at any screen.
Not distracted by a million other things at the same time.
So, and we still do that. He also said perspective, and I said, what do you mean perspective? We were going through the loss of a child, and he said, we'd been through so much. I think I understood that if we'd survived all of that, we could continue surviving.
Yeah.
Real strength that he drew from the experience.
Absolutely.
And I do think there is a strength in grief and loss. There's a power that can come out of it if you're able to kind of harness that, because you can survive anything if you've survived this.
Definitely.
And I think that can be really powerful for people too, is that you can get lost in it, or you can go, hey, I've done the equivalent of walked through a burning fire and come out the other side.
That's right. Absolutely. And that shows such strength and resilience. But you're right, you know, when I look after couples that experience loss, I say to them, you know, this is the worst thing that you will ever have to go through in your lives. You know, no one should ever have to go through losing a child. I just think it's absolutely, you know, the pain must be just unbearable. And I say to couples when they go through it, you know, they often try to put on a brave face initially. And I say to them, you don't have to diminish what this means. You know, this is such a huge thing to go through in your life that you're allowed to grieve, you know, so much. But it's then about building resilience and strength, just as you and Will have done, obviously, and talking to each other and to, you know, your care team that have been looking after you, and you know, talking through everything that you need to. And it takes time, but you're right. I think trying to balance that grief with allowing yourselves to move forward, that takes time. That certainly does. But when you get to that point, then I think the pain slowly eases. And I think that's what you're saying and what I've seen through the couples that I've looked after in these scenarios. And, you know, I haven't been through a loss myself, and I don't want to speak out of turn. And that's why having you share your insights is just so incredibly invaluable. But based on what you're saying, I want to say that, you know, a lot of couples that I look after say exactly what you're saying. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
And I think leaning into your grief helps you not get through it quicker, but you're kind of letting it. Whereas, you know, if you're pushing it away and trying to pretend it's not happening, it's just going to come back up in other ways.
Absolutely. Definitely. Acknowledge it for what it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Priyanka. And, you know, as we've said, it's just such an incredibly difficult time for a family going through this. But, you know, for the people who love you in the world, it's very hard for them as well, you know, hard in that they are sad for you, they're sad for themselves, but they also want to be there to help you. But as I said before, you know, I think a lot of people who haven't ever supported someone through loss before, they don't know what to do. Sometimes they think that they'll just withdraw completely, and that can be seen as, you know, not being particularly helpful. There are others who sit there and ask you all the time, how are you, how are you, how are you? And I think that that might be overwhelming and intrusive at times. How do these people find the right balance? How can they support you? And, you know, how can they do that not only emotionally, but what other things can they do? Like you said, you know, having friends bring in meals and those sorts of things, that's something that's productive and useful. I mean, obviously, you know, getting flowers and gifts, it's lovely and generous and kind, but what did you find most helpful and meaningful sort of moving forward?
I think we were incredibly lucky that we had a really supportive and intuitive family and friends, and we all were almost on this learning curve together. So sometimes I was absolutely blown away by how thoughtful they were. I was like, I don't think I've seen that thoughtful. You know, just like leaving a coffee on our doorstep and then texting saying, open your front door, there's coffee, hot coffees on the door.
Perfect.
Food. And I think if you're unsure about what to say or what to do, dropping a care package, or if you don't feel comfortable going near their house, ordering something online and having it delivered will be appreciated. And like flowers, candles, chocolates are brilliant because they do bring beauty for a while and they make you feel a little bit better. So I would never say don't bring flowers, candles,
Good.
chocolate, bath oil, you know, anything that, and
Little pamper package.
pamper package, anything like that, and not just things, a little text message. Like you
Yep.
said, there's a balance between being intrusive, but I think text message is really great if you're worried about being intrusive, because it's
It
not
is.
like they're being forced to answer the
That's
message.
right. You can reply in your own time. That's it.
Yeah, and just showing up as a friend, or a family member saying something. I mean, I
Yep.
think the only things I would say, don't ever start a sentence with "at least,"
Yep.
or "everything happens for a reason,"
Yep.
or don't try and give them a silver lining. And as humans, we are preconditioned to almost want to make things better. So
Yep.
it's hard. You have to hold back. And I know that I try to do it too. Something terrible happens to someone and I'm still like, oh, and then I'm like, no, stand back.
Pull back. Yep.
Just say, this is really shit. Like, and I'm sorry. It's
Yep. Absolutely.
Don't say, at least you can still get pregnant, or at least you can have another baby.
Yep.
Say it, and be willing to sit in awkward silence, I think.
Definitely.
Is part of it.
Absolutely. It's really, you know, interesting having you say that, because when I am looking after couples going through it, that's exactly how I start every single time. I say, this is the worst thing you'll ever go through. This is so shit. And I wish, you know, that you didn't have to go through this. And, you know, you just let them grieve. You know, it's not about justifying things all the time. It's just about recognizing how terrible it is and, you know, being there to listen.
Yeah, I think that's it, is not looking for silver linings, be there to listen. And, you know, I think you can balance it. Sometimes, you know, you can feel that someone will be, it might be useful to be like, you will be okay, and we're going to support you through this. And we're all going to be with you. And I also think with friends and family, and it's important to remember that they can't be mind readers. So as you said, they really want to help. So if you really want them to do something, then ask for it. So our family is wonderful, and they know that every Christmas I get nervous that people are going to forget Lily. And so every Christmas I send this sort of like, oh, I just want to make sure we're incorporating Lily into Christmas. And
wonderful.
They're always 10 steps ahead of me.
Of course.
You know, presents, and they've got little table setting things for Lily and all of that. But I also think it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm not let down by other people because I haven't told them what I want.
Absolutely.
I think communication is really important in that space. And I think there will always be, unfortunately, some friends that do diminish further in these sorts of things, and some people that are really unexpected that come out and surprise you, and you have a close. So I think that's a really important thing to hold on to. There was one other thing I was going to say about friends, but if I remember it or find where I've written it, I'll come back to it.
Fantastic. Hearing you also say, you know, you want Lily to be a part of every Christmas, I think that's something critical to recognise. And what I always say to couples when they go through loss, this will always be your baby. You will always be this baby's, you know, mum and dad and parents. And, you know, that's something really important to remember, that just because you lose your child, it doesn't mean that they're not yours anymore. You know, you've been their parent. It's such an important role. And I think it's really, really important to realise that you still have Lily as your child. And that's what I want to ask you a little bit about as well now. How do you talk to people about Lily, you know? And before you had Jasper, you know, I think that, you know, it changes in terms of your approach potentially slightly. I'd be interested to hear what you say. But once you'd lost Lily, before you had Jasper, and you would be out, and this is a question that one of my followers has asked, you know, how did you respond if someone used to say to you, do you have children? I hope you don't mind me asking that question, because I think that's a really, really hard one. But someone put that question to me yesterday, and I would be really interested to see what your take on it is.
It really evolved with my grief. So in the very beginning, if someone asked me, I felt like I had an absolute obligation to Lily to tell everybody and anybody who asked me that I had a baby and the baby had died and her name was Lily. Still a part of my life. time went on, I recognized that I had the choice over who I would share that information with, and I wouldn't put false guilt on myself for not doing it. Lily knows that I love her. And I didn't need to tell an Uber driver who I was speaking to, you know, and it can be. So
yeah, of course.
I choose now, and sometimes I get a sense that I'll tell the person in the bakery who asked me if Jasper's child, and other times I don't. I really judge it on my headspace, who that person is, you know, and I don't fall into the trap of feeling guilty that you have to say every time, because it's absolutely your choice.
Good on you.
And yeah, that's the way I approach it now.
Fantastic. Makes a lot of sense to me. Very, everything you're saying tonight makes so much sense, and you know, I feel very lucky that you're helping so many of my followers with this sort of scenario. I might move on to sort of the next thing that a lot of people want to know about, and that is about dealing with a subsequent pregnancy. Now, obviously, as an obstetrician, dealing with patients who've had loss when they come to see me, you know, they always want to know, well, when can I actually try for another baby? And I always say there are two really important aspects to that question. The more important one really for most couples is when you feel emotionally and psychologically ready to embark upon another pregnancy, because that pregnancy will be filled with a huge amount of anxiety at different stages depending on when your previous pregnancy loss or baby loss has occurred. That sort of often influences, you know, for women that have had ectopic pregnancies like you did with your first pregnancy, or a miscarriage, are often really anxious early in the pregnancy. And I say to those couples, come and see me every week so I can give you reassurance that everything's, you know, heading in the right direction. Whereas for couples who've lost babies later in a pregnancy or after they've been born, like you did with Lily, often it's the later stages of the pregnancy which tend to be a little bit more anxious. Unfortunately for you, you had both of those, so I'm sure your entire pregnancy was anxiety filled. But you know, my job as an obstetrician is to give that support. And if couples say to me, Scott, we need to see you every week, that's exactly what I do. So that's the first part of it. But the second part is when you're physically ready to go again. And that's not always sort of a relevant factor if you've, you know, lost a child like you have at 10 months of age. But for some people who may have had a cesarean section and lost a baby very shortly thereafter, they may need to wait a little bit longer before their scar has healed and they're safe to try again. So there are different things that go into it, and it really needs to be individualized based on the particular scenario. But as someone who experienced, you know, such an important loss, when did you guys decide for you that it was okay to try again? You know, what sort of healing did you need to have gone through by that point for it to feel like something that would be manageable for you? And it might have been different for both of you, but I'm not sure what your approach would have been.
Well, so firstly with the ectopic, I think I waited about 3 months. I wanted to get my head in the right space again before we were ready to try again. And then after I had Lily, we did genetic carrier screening. So we have those sorts of things to think about. And we were very fortunate that actually we don't carry any genetic conditions. We didn't pass it on to Lily. It was just a random thing. So that kind of was our first step. We're like, okay. And then we actually... Lily loved children, so we thought she was going to live for a couple of years. So we thought, let's have another baby so she can have a sibling. Having a sibling while she's still alive. And I look back at that now, and it would have been so hard to manage. But we actually started I started taking prenatal vitamins before she died, and went and did acupuncture, and I was doing all these things to be like ease my
optimize your fertility.
But you know, looking back on it, the stress levels when you're caring for a
I can't imagine.
Child, like, we don't know how, but I got pregnant, and I discovered I was pregnant with Jasper the day after Lily's funeral. Like,
really,
it was. So I guess I can't answer the question in how do you sort of get ready after your child has died, because I didn't get that opportunity, and I didn't, you know, that was life. And maybe the answer is there is no perfect time. You could put it off. And in some ways, deciding to have another child now that we have Jasper is harder than that decision of having him, because it happened.
Definitely.
But being pregnant so soon after losing a baby was like running a marathon every day. It was yeah, it was very, very full on.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, it just happens like that. I don't know if I would recommend that to people. It was just, it was happening. So initially I called my doctor and I said,
Yep.
Brian, can we still go to Japan?
Yep.
He said, yes, go,
Yep.
come back before, I think around 7 weeks when ectopics
Sure.
start to act up.
Yep.
And then we'll just manage it from there. So we did do a lot of testing as well.
Yep.
I did a CVS at 12 weeks, so
Yep.
more intensive testing.
Yep.
And that gave me so much peace of mind. So we were able to rule out genetic and chromosomal issues at that stage, and I would definitely do that again.
Absolutely. And what parts of your pregnancy with Jasper did you find the hardest? Were there certain sort of triggers for you that made you remember, difficult moments with Lily, or what was it that you found the hardest being pregnant for the the third time, but with Jasper?
I think, all of it. The first 13 weeks until we could get the results, and I guess sort of 15 weeks by the time you get everything back, was horrendous.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I had such a great medical team that I went back again, and the good side of that was your doctor and your ultrasound specialist.
Definitely.
But it's also a bit re-traumatizing because you're often in the same rooms, and I remember on the 30-week ultrasound, because I wanted to do it, so I did a lot of extra ultrasounds. I think I probably did like 3-4 weeks, just to I called them my mental health scans.
Oh, absolutely.
I was really fixated on the brain development, and I wanted to know that the brain was developing the right way. But my doctor, just kind of went with it and was happy for me to do those. The 36-week scan was very, very stressful, and as luck would have it, it ended up being in the same room where at Royal Melbourne, where we had the initial diagnosis. Like, it was just bizarre that happened. So after that, my anxiety ramped up again, and I did end up scheduling an induction. I needed to have a day and just have baby here.
Absolutely.
So I think, initially the first few weeks, horrendous, and then again later towards the end of the pregnancy. But, it wasn't easy. What I did do was a lot of self-care. I kept doing the acupuncture. I did pregnancy massage. Yep. I had regular facials. I spent a lot of time just doing nothing, reading trashy and not working with Lily. I was working and flying around Australia and doing all this stuff up until didn't do any of that. I just kept it as good as I could.
Brilliant. And I think you bring up a few really important triggers that a lot of people talk to me about, and I often say to couples when they come back to see me, 6 weeks after they've lost a baby, that walking back into my office is probably one of the hardest things I'll ever have to do. I credit the bravery that they show to walk back into a place that brings back so many difficult memories, and one wouldn't resent people for saying coming back into this place is just too hard for us. But what I do often find, and as you've said here, is that, once you've been looked after by a team, regardless of the outcome, you've put so much trust in that medical group that you want to go back to them for the rest of your future care. And most couples that I look after who have lost a baby, albeit very difficult for them, say that they wouldn't want to have their next pregnancy looked after anywhere else, because it's that comfort of knowing that you've got someone who knows your whole history and has looked after you throughout every step of that difficult journey, that hopefully they'll be able to take you through a more positive experience a subsequent time. But you're right, it's really hard, and I have patients that say, with the ultrasounds, for example, can we go somewhere else, or can we just have a different person? Not because the person or the place didn't do a brilliant job the first time round, but those memories can be very, very triggering. And some people, want to create a slightly new or different experience with their next pregnancy, just because they find that is emotionally better for them. But everyone's different. And as I always say to couples, there's no right or wrong. And you guide me through your journey. You tell me what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I'll do whatever I can to accommodate that and make it the experience that you want it to be. But you're absolutely right. It's such a difficult thing to do. But yeah, as I say, I just can't imagine what it is like walking back into a room that brings back so many memories, but it must be just so hard.
Yeah, it is very triggering. I think these things often, once you actually do them, they're not as bad.
Yep.
So if you build it up, and then you do it, and you're like, I survived that. Like, okay, we can get going. But,
absolutely.
And something about not having to keep sharing your story. So you've got that shared connection with healthcare providers, doctors who've been through it with you.
Definitely.
And not having to go through it time and time again, I think is a big one.
Reduces the emotional burden probably of having to tell your story time and time again.
Yeah, I think it can be very re-traumatizing to have to keep kind of sharing it with someone that you kind of might see for 5 minutes, and the nurse you might see for 5 minutes and never again, or the ultrasound technician, like that.
Definitely. Absolutely. And the other thing, talking about having the extra scans and booking the induction of labour, what I often say to couples is that I can't necessarily change the course or the trajectory of what's going to happen here, but I can give you that reassurance that things are okay. And as I said, if that means weekly scans or, a fortnightly scans or monthly scans or an induction of labour at a safe gestation, there are so many things that you can do, not to change the course of the pregnancy, but to make it a much more manageable time for a couple that have been through loss before. And it's, that's a really important part of my role as an obstetrician, is to give that support to help couples who've been through this, because, it's not something that you should have to go through on your own. That's the answer.
That's right. And I think just having a doctor that understands that it's normal to be anxious and to work with you makes a world of difference, because they're acknowledging what you've been through and acknowledging how traumatic it is, not dismissing it.
Definitely.
And there's so much comfort, I think, that can be placed in that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And one of my followers has asked, and we sort of have addressed it, I think, largely, but just to summarise, they want to know, how can you enjoy a pregnancy after loss? And I know you've spoken about doing all nice self-care things, but, this person has said that they found it so difficult not to focus on what's gone, previously, and to focus on the past. But how can you try and not just get through the pregnancy, but to actually enjoy the experience of being pregnant with a healthy baby?
And I did keep seeing my psychologist through that, right up until and just after Jasper was born. And one of the things that she helped me with was it was a little bit of I kept thinking, if I didn't think about being pregnant, then I wouldn't be upset if something went wrong. And she helped me realise that actually, of course, I would still be upset if something went wrong. So not thinking about or not enjoying the pregnancy wasn't going to impact how I would feel if something went wrong. And that helped me kind of flip it around and go, actually, if something went wrong and I spent the whole pregnancy ignoring it, I'd probably be more devastated than if I tried to connect with this baby and try and make the most of those moments. It wasn't easy. Like it was very, and I was still grieving the loss of Lily, and
absolutely
days that were terrible. But as much as I could, I tried to do that. We both tried to connect with the baby, and just take the photos and feel the baby moving, and
wonderful,
and just try and have that time out to dream. I think, because when you've had a loss, you often don't let yourself have hopes and dreams. But realizing that not having a hope or a dream doesn't actually put any control over the situation. So why not hope and dream?
You're absolutely right.
That way around.
Absolutely. I think a lot of couples say to me, until we're holding a healthy baby safely in our arms, we can't enjoy this experience. And that must be a very, very hard way to manage, 9 months. It must be incredibly hard.
Yeah, and I totally relate to that. I think having another baby, I feel like there's a whole gearing up to it. There's we have to be ready for this. We have to be ready for anything to happen, and
definitely.
But I great. But yeah, I think there's practical things you can do. Take lots of photos, do a
Yep.
photography, do
Beautiful.
do them listening to play the classical
Yep.
music and all that sort of
Yep.
stuff. Just try and create some special memories.
Absolutely.
Even if you're not enjoying them, you might find out that you do enjoy it more.
And retrospectively, you can go back and enjoy those moments that you had as well, I think, which is important.
Yes.
Definitely. And speaking of, your next pregnancy, now you've got your beautiful little Jasper with you. How have you chosen, if you don't mind me asking, to integrate Lily into his life? What will you tell him about Lily? How will you, as you said, she's still going to be a part of every Christmas, but how will you, make her an important part of his life?
So Lily is just part of our life all the time.
Yep.
We say
Great.
good morning to her. We say good night to her.
Amazing.
Kind of photos of her all around the house. He knows
Yep.
that's Lily.
Yeah.
He's 2, so I
Yep.
mean it's hard to explain why she's not
Yeah.
here. And we kind of want him to grow up knowing that he had a sister, that we love her very much. She's not
Yep.
here anymore.
Yep.
But she's not a secret. She's not something,
Brilliant.
scary or bad. But we're also very conscious that we don't want him to feel that she's something he can't live up to,
Sure.
or some sort of. We don't want him to feel like we would prefer her. So it's a delicate balance, I think, all the time.
Of course it is.
And
you probably have to refine how you manage that as he gets older. Each year his understanding changes, and you have to slightly, I suppose, change how you explain things to him. And that's one of the, I suppose, the very big challenges for you as parents. But I think that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, I think as time goes on, it will change. At the moment, we have birthday parties for Lily. He
Amazing.
gets out of that, so
great. Does he get to blow out her candles?
Yes. All the kids come around at Lily. They all get cake, they get candles.
Excellent.
So we just figure that if we incorporate her into our life, she won't be. She'll be someone he can always ask questions about, and that is kind of part of why we set up the foundation for her too.
Perfect.
He can have a say in where that money goes.
It's so great. Absolutely. And you've actually preempted my next question, which is, can you tell us a bit more about the Lily Calvert Foundation, and what are you aiming to do with it, and how can people who are watching tonight who want to contribute, how can they do that?
So we set it up, the Lily Calvert Memorial Fund, as I said earlier, after friends came to us with the idea, and they actually did all of the paperwork for us.
Amazing.
And had it all up and ready in a week. For her funeral. And we support other families with children who are in paediatric palliative care. So we're kind of supporting families where there is no cure, and also bereavement support and grief support. So this year we launched the Lily Calvert Musical Care Program, which is a partnership with various kids, and it's aimed at training healthcare providers, doctors, nurses and carers in how to incorporate music therapy into their daily care of the children. So often music therapy is done in a really, you have an hour for music therapy, but this is a really new and innovative program that's helping to take those techniques and use them in the care. So if they're administering meds, they might incorporate music to help relax children. Getting the children to bed, they might use music and turn the music on. And it sounds really simple, but actually in a clinical setting, music isn't
unbelievable.
Really
Definitely.
So that's something we're really excited about. It's being trialled this year at Very Special Kids.
Great. And congratulations. Wonderful.
Take that more broadly.
And Very Special Kids do an incredible job. I know they've looked after patients of mine previously, and their work is outstanding. So the collaboration between you and them, I'm sure, is particularly powerful. So well done.
Really exciting. And just quickly, in the bereavement support, we are looking at the moment. We raised money last year in New South Wales for a cuddle cot, and the partner that we had looked to donate to actually received one before then. So if anyone's listening and they know of a health service looking for a cuddle cot, we're trying to find a good partnership there. So
incredible. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So I think you have spoken better than anyone else could have tonight. You're incredibly eloquent and courageous, and I, thank you on behalf of everyone listening tonight for sharing your remarkable story with us. And I can't imagine what it takes to tell your story. It must be very difficult to do it, time after time. But I think the impact that you will have on so many people is just, it's immeasurable. And, I truly, truly thank you for talking about a very, very difficult topic. Thank you. And if there's anything we can ever do to support, you or other families going through this, please let us know, because I feel very passionate about helping people who have experienced a loss. I think that in obstetrics, a lot of what we do is positive and ends with a really happy outcome. And it's wonderful to be a part of that. But for some people, it doesn't always go that way. And my job is even more important in those cases. So thank you for helping me to get my point across here. And you've done it, as I say, just so remarkably well. And I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Look, it's an absolute pleasure to share. I do love talking about Lily, and I get a lot out of it myself as well. And I was very excited to see an obstetrician taking such a keen interest in this really important space. And I think that change in how we talk about loss and bringing it out from being hidden and taboo comes through recognition and through doctors like you being willing to kind of open the conversation up. I think it's really helpful.
Thanks, Priyanka. I really, really appreciate it. Have you got any other tips you want to share before we finish for the evening?
Let me just see. Look, if anybody has any questions, feel free to.
I was just going to ask that. Great.
And DM me as well, or
excellent.
Now, I could talk for hours on this topic, so please don't feel afraid to get over if you want to. I think I've covered a lot of it, but yeah, there is always more that you can do.
Absolutely. And if you think of other things that you haven't spoken about tonight, I'm also very happy to share them through my page as well. So feel free to send them to me, Priyanka, and we can put some stuff together that helps and supports couples and families going through this. But once again, my wife is watching this from the other room and just is so beyond impressed with everything you've spoken about tonight. So thank you once again, and good luck with everything. And, I hope the rest of the week goes well, and we look forward to being in touch with you soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Priyanka. Have a good night. Take care. Bye.